Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So today I'll be talking about one part of my research on predicting mental health from mobile and wearable devices. Um, so I'll go ahead and just talk about the general work I do in my lab, Human AI Technology Lab, um, as we heard in the introduction, just a little bit more. Um, my lab focuses on research in the area or in the at the intersection of AI and machine learning and human-computer interaction, ubiquitous and mobile computing. Within this area, I work on modeling human behavior from diverse data streams to build context-aware systems that can act and respond according to human needs. Most of my work has a health and wellness application, but we do different types of work from theoretical reinforcement learning to work that touches on social computing, like trust and friendship, etc. So the three essential ingredients that I have used in most of my work are passive sensing, longitudinal data collection, and behavior modeling with AI and machine learning. I use these three ingredients to build models to detect and predict um, health conditions in this application and provide intervention. The areas of health that I have worked on are mental health, physical health, and social health. I'll be focusing on mental health cases for this talk. And specifically, I would start with a case study in forecasting mood in bipolar disorder. Um, Before that, um, and I will talk about this case because it has a significant impact on the direction of my research. Because when I started doing that work, we did not even know if mobile devices could provide any signals um, to human behavior or cues, and let alone if it could be used for detecting mental health status. So that was significant, and I like to mention this in my talk. So these days we are so used to these mobile and smartphone sensors and wearable sensors, and we know they can track physiology, they can track behavior. But back then we did not have any idea. So this work um, started during my postdoc and during a project called Monarca for monitoring and managing bipolar disorder. So the idea was to build mobile applications and a full loop um, application, so to speak, that helps bipolar patients to manage their condition and be able to see how it progresses. Also for clinicians to be able to monitor the state of the patients and be able to act accordingly if their situation worsens. So just a little bit about bipolar disorder. It is a health condition where the patient's mood swings between the extremes of mania and depression. And if it is not controlled, the patient has potential to fall into the extreme of depression and mania. So this is a condition that affects like around 6 million people, American adults every year. However, 1 in 5 patients with suicidal thoughts actually commit suicide. So this is a condition that really needs to be controlled continuously and monitored. So the way that it is the treatment and management of this condition traditionally done is through psychotherapeutic techniques, so psychoeducation and self-assessment. So patients used to be given like these sheets to track their behavior, how much they slept, how much alcohol they used, did they take their medication, etc. So the problem with this paper-based method was that patients often forgot to fill it in, and they would fill it when they before the therapy session. So there wasn't um, a constant or a continuous reliable way of tracking patients' behavior. So the first thing we did in Monarca was to develop a self-monitoring application where a mobile app, patients would have a diary, they would report their symptoms um, and their behavior on the app. They could see graphs of how they were doing during the past month, year, week, etc. And they would also have warning signs and triggers that would show if, for example, they weren't sleeping well or they were watching TV too much. They might be a sign of mania or depression. And it will actually notify the clinicians if there were too many warning signs. Um, so this helped a lot, and patients and they were able to track themselves more regularly. However, the problem was still there. So clinicians relied on the patients to fill out these diaries. And if the patients did not provide this information, clinicians would have no way of tracking what was going on with the patients. So what we wanted to do was to investigate how much the mobile sensing capabilities could provide signals to the status of these patients. But at that time, we did not have any data or any um, idea or results to see whether or not the signals are actually useful. So um, what we had was mostly the self-reported data of mood, sleep, medication, activity, etc. So in order to assess the feasibility of the algorithmic or objective approach, we ran a study. So we had collected data from like around 10 patients, bipolar patients. So we ran a study where we analyzed the self-reported data. We asked the patients to rank how much or the importance of this each behavior factor and their impact on their mood. So, for example, here 8 patients said sleep was number one, followed by activity, stress, and so on. Then we gave the same data to three algorithms, chi-squared, information gain, and significance, and we did the same ranking. And what we noticed was that there were variations, but however, the five highest ranked parameters uh, were mainly common, like activity, sleep, active warning signs, and stress. So the main difference was that sleep was number one according to patients. Our algorithms consistently said the level of activity was first, followed by the sleep. But this was good sign for us. At least we knew there was some agreement between algorithms and the patients themselves. So we went ahead and built a machine learning pipeline as part of the Monarca system. And it was actually deployed. This was, to my knowledge, this was the first deployed ML system for mental health prediction. So what we did, we collected data from smartphone sensors, accelerometers, screen usage, calls, location, and applications patients were running. We extracted features and clean, transformed data. We also built two components for first predicting the mood on the current day and extracting the impact factors affecting the mood of the patients for the past and the current. We also did time series forecasting to forecast the mood of the patients 5 days ahead of time. And we developed also a mobile application in form of a wallpaper and a web portal to show information about the forecast to patients. For identifying past and current behavior factors impacting mood, we use ensemble methods and different algorithms on tree-based algorithms, support vector machine, regression-based, and also use these ranking algorithms that I just showed you before to rank the factors and the features. We also use time series forecasting using support vector machine for regression and inferred the mood score 5 days ahead of time. That -3 indicated depressed to 3 being manic. And we categorize the scores into depressed, neutral, and mixed mood and manic. We also developed the application interface on the phone, and this was done in collaboration and co-design with patients and clinicians. So there was this ambient wallpaper that we used to call it is in form of bubbles, and this is what the patients decided to be developed and be the final design. So to make sure that we preserve privacy of the patients. So if somebody other than patients sees this phone, they wouldn't be able to tell what this is about, but patients would be able to see. So the size of the bubble, each bubble was actually one behavior factor like activity, sleep, alcohol, defined by the color, and the direction or the size would say how big impact that factor has had on the mood. The directionality would say whether it's past or current. So the direction to the left would say it's a past factor of the past week. The direction to the right would be is current or future. So we showed this to the patients. We did not show mood forecast to the patients, only we showed it on the portal to clinicians. We had long debates with the clinicians whether or not the mood forecast should be shown to the patients. However, the consensus was that, or clinicians were worried that if you show a patient that they're going to be depressed for the next 5 days or week as well, they might actually their condition might actually worsen. So that is why we decided not to show it on the application. So we ran a study and we got feedback from patients and clinicians. Patients thought the impact factors informed them about the unknown interconnections. Like, for example, oh, I didn't know that whenever I have too much alcohol, I won't be able to sleep, or it's something very simple. Um, but so it was informative in that sense, but they were also sometimes unsure how to interpret the data we provided to them. In terms of forecast on of the mood, clinicians' reaction was mixed. They used it as an indicator to observe, but they relied on their own expertise, and this was totally fine with us. So it was all good. However, what we wanted to know was whether or how much passively sensed data could provide signals in terms of the mental health status of the patient. So we built models of passive data only and passive data plus self-reported information from patients. And what we observed was that these models built with only passive data provided nearly the same performance as self-report. So this was a quite early indication. It was quite impactful that informed my future research. This paper was actually like last year was, or 2 years ago, in fact, in 2023 was nominated for the 10-year Impact Award. So it did have some impact in terms of informing the community about the potential of passive sensing signal for mental health assessment. So the application was also commercialized, and so it's a company that is currently actually is being used. The application is being used in several Danish hospitals, and um, for me, it led to more collaborations. I've been working on building multiple applications of this type in passive monitoring of symptoms in cancer patients, in mood ring, managing adolescents' mental health. So just a little bit about the mood ring application. This pretty much the same concept as Monarca, where we built an application for that had both the mobile side and the backend side for monitoring adolescents' behavior in terms of mental health management. The slight difference was that we had parents also involved in this project because of the population. Had a clinician's portal as well to view the patient condition and the research team support in the back. We ran a clinical trial and we still are analyzing the data. But the application, even though the application was pretty similar, just tracking passive sensing data and analyzing it, we focused on different challenges because for in behavior tracking and modeling using data that is not in the controlled environment, there are lots of challenges. Like, for example, um, data collection on smartphones um, can drain the battery, and we have had this problem for a long time. Because of different conditions, again, we were not able to monitor the patients um, and people in the wild. We don't know whether they have the sensor on, whether the sensor is malfunctioning, or whether they turn off the sensor, like for example, GPS location tracking, they might turn it off. So as a result, we can't collect data. And we have to rely on the users to obtain what we call ground truth for building machine learning models. Um, and like given that mental health condition is as a long-term condition, we have had challenges in keeping users in the study and have them um, use the application for a longer time. So that's the ongoing challenge. Also, we because we rely on the patient's self-reported data for ground truth. Of course, if we can get that on a daily basis or hourly basis, would be great. However, again, for a long-term study, it's almost impossible, and it causes people to drop out of the study. So we have to be able to sense and collect the data continuously, which we are able to, but we cannot really collect the ground truth or self-report data from patients all the time. So the models we build have this challenge of having continuous daily sensing, but not much ground truth. We also have the problem of if we apply, we develop an application and we deploy it, there is no data at the beginning from the user. So we have this cold start problem, how to predict the state of the user at the beginning. Also, there's a question whether we build a personalized model or individualized model using the data from only the person which has the problem of not having enough data versus using data from the entire population of people. It also has its own challenges because each person's behavior is specific. And if we use the population models, it might not reflect the individual's status. So related to this, the two last challenges, we have this in Moodring application. So in order to deal with some of these not having initial data, we ran what we call a phase 1 study where we recruited some adolescents who used our application, and we collected data for 24 weeks. And then we built what we called population models, which we used the data from all patients, tested it on another patient to see how well it works. We also built individualized models where we used, for example, different models used data from all data from the patients and testing on 1 week or regardless of the temporal aspect. But the more realistic one was given that this application would be deployed in the real world, we will have, for example, 1 week of data, and the next week we would have to predict the mood based on the previous week of data. So that's what we call cumulative model building. And so as we collect more data, we would build more accurate models. And at least that was our hypothesis. And we did show that these models actually perform better in terms of accuracy over time. So, and that is what we ended up deploying in the Moodring application, starting with the population model from other users and personalizing it over time as we collected more data. So this was the purely predicting using data from patients in detecting their status. But I want to also touch on another aspect of behavior modeling that has to do with cyclic models, because we all have this, as humans, we have this, we are affected by the environmental conditions that affect our biological and behavioral cycles, and environmental cycles, also the sleep-wake cycle or Earth rotation causes changes in our biological processes and behavior. These models, or sorry, these cycles affect our health status as well. So, given that we knew that it was possible to collect biobehavioral data by mobile technology in the wild, our question was, can we detect and model rhythmicity in the human behavior in the passive sensing data we collect? And if we can, are those models useful in predicting health outcomes, for example, mental health and depression? We also wanted to explore to see, okay, how many and what type of biobehavioral rhythms are there? We know about circadian rhythm that repeats 24 hours, but there are also other weekly cycles or the monthly cycles. We also know about menstrual cycle as monthly, but we did not know if there are other cycles we're not aware of. We do not know how often they repeat. And more importantly, related to us, we did not know if we collect them from mobile and wearable devices, what sensing signals reveal information about those cycles. So the challenge we had was that different data sources that we collect from mobile and wearable devices may capture various aspects of the cyclic behavior. And as a result, because we didn't know what signals are more useful, we had to analyze and explore all signals. And our approach would result in a multiple and a large number of models that would be impossible to manually interpret. And as a result, we needed to have automated and computational steps to acquire the insights. So these challenges led to us developing a computational framework for modeling biobehavioral rhythms. And this was the work of my PhD student who graduated a couple of years ago. We basically built this framework to collect data, of course, from the mobile and wearable devices, process it, and build different models and apply those signals and models to different applications for different types of predictions in health, productivity, and detecting generally variation, stability in cyclic behavior, etc. So I'm going to focus on only the first part of this framework. It is an ongoing work still. We have collected a lot of data from over a year of data, which is pretty unique in the sense, and we're still analyzing. But I'm going to talk about this part of the machine learning pipeline that we developed and used it for a couple of cases for mental health detection in students population. So as I mentioned, it's just the sensor data collection, general cleaning and processing, feature extraction. The part that was different was detecting rhythmicity and periodicity in the signal and applying it in different time window. So we built a model that would convert the raw signal into a sine waves, and that and then we would analyze or extract parameters from those models. So in the cyclic or the wave has some parameters like acrophase, amplitude, that is the length of the wave from the midline. Acrophase is the time from, or the distance from the reference time to the first peak in the signal, the period where the signal repeats, and etc. So we used all of these parameters and extracted all these parameters and used them in a machine learning model for training, and evaluated the model for predicting different outcomes. So the first case study I'm going to talk about where we use this framework was the college students' mental health. The questions we had were, can we observe cyclic patterns in students by behavioral data over the course of the semester? And if we can, are those patterns consistent throughout the semester, or they change in different periods? Do we observe differences in rhythmic patterns among students with different health status? If we can, do healthy students have more stable behavioral patterns than those with health conditions? And lastly, how accurately can the model of this behavioral rhythms predict mental health status. And the more importantly, what cyclic features are associated with health status. So we applied this approach on the data we had collected from smartphone and Fitbit of 138 first-year students. And this data was from smartphone sensors like Bluetooth, call, location, screen. And we also had Fitbit sleep and steps. For the ground truth, we collected 2 pre-semester and post-semester surveys on depression status, loneliness, etc. And data was collected over 16 weeks. The outcomes we were looking for were post-semester depression, and then a binary, no depression, mild or moderate, severe depression, and post-semester loneliness, no to low loneliness, and moderate to high loneliness. And just the statistics was pre-semester depression in our population were 14%. It increased to 40.6% at the end of the semester, whereas loneliness started higher, 63.8%, and was reduced to 58.8% at the end, which kind of makes sense for the first year students, but the level is still very high. So in order to build the cyclic models, we processed this data, we grouped the data because we wanted to have the more granular models of looking at the behavior as in details as possible, because we have collected this sensor data continuously and more fine-grained manner. So we group the data into hourly bins and extract features related to mobility, activities, communication, social interaction, and sleep. For example, extracting travel distance, sleep efficiency, movement, etc. Then we split the semester data into 14 days or 2 weeks of time windows, and to look at how much the behavior would change between the time windows, whether the students still have a stable pattern or cyclic pattern, or it will change, and how it will change, when it will change. And then we built these behavioral models for each student and each time windows. I'm going to present only a couple of the results. Again, they're massive. On the sleep duration, for example, we observed that most students maintain their regular daily sleep duration patterns despite differences in different time, for example, midterm versus final and so on. Still, they their sleep duration is pretty regular and consistent. But in different conditions, like for example, we had this is for depression groups. We looked at the students who did not depression pre and post throughout the semester, or students who were not depressed at the beginning but were depressed at the end of the semester, those who were depressed at the beginning but not depressed at the end, and those who were depressed throughout the semester. And we see that this group who had depression throughout the semester had least daily sleep duration patterns compared to the other group. But generally, what we observed that depression may disrupt the shorter sleep cycles more than the daily cycles. So the 24 hours cycle was still persistent even in this group. We also looked at the time windows throughout the semester. We saw those who developed depression and loneliness towards the end of the semester had lower regularity in their sleep durations. And this is after sort of midterm. that we see lower percentage of students with regular sleep duration. So that was one of the observations we had. We also looked at the accuracy of the models for predicting mental health status and what features are associated with the health status using this pipeline that I just mentioned. So the results, again, are massive. We basically looked at all time windows alone, and combination of time windows, as well as the each sensor modality alone and in combination with other sensors. So just to give you one instance of the results were that what we observed was the models that use the rhythmic and cyclic features generally outperformed the models that did not use these cyclic features. So this is for predicting loneliness, and these are the features, sensor features, and all of them see the results are higher than the raw sensor features. So this was this great observation to see the impact of additional cyclic parameters in detecting mental health status. As related, but a different case study was using data from Oura Ring, where we collected this data from 11 volunteers over several months. So in the previous study, we only collected data from one semester. So it was 3 months of data. But in this one, we had longer time of data collection, meaning that each person had a different length of data or amount of data that were collected. It went up to 1 year, I believe. So yeah, so this like roughly close to 1 year. And many participants had roughly 6 months of data. So we wanted to, I don't know if you're familiar with Oura Ring, it basically infers readiness score based on the sleep data and activity at the previous day. So we wanted to predict this score from our models. So we built the same type of model that I just mentioned. And our observations was that we saw near weekly cycles in activity, sleep, and heart rate data. Like activity is pretty much just like ends at the week, which makes sense. Probably people have routines and exercise routines that are weekly. Sleep as well. So nearly 6, 8, and then 12, which is like bi-weekly. In skin temperature, however, was interesting that we saw bi-weekly almost of cycles for skin temperature. So this is our first observation. We have to go back and look at why that might be the reason, but this is something interesting to discuss with clinicians to see if there is something else. We haven't seen anything in the literature about this cycle, so it would be interesting to see if actually this data reveals anything that we did not know. In terms of predicting readiness, we saw that the parameters that are indicative of variability in the model were highly predictive of readiness. So this here is measure standard error, and the SE stands for standard error, meaning that this is the difference between the raw signal and the model fit. And so the higher this is standard error, of course, it indicates more variability. And that would be more predictive of the state of readiness. That was also a great observation. What signals and what features might be useful in predicting an outcome in cyclic features. Generally, we saw combined sleep calories and steps data predicted readiness with lower error. As I mentioned, we looked at each sensor modality alone and in combination. So we saw these three combinations provided better predictions in terms of readiness. So that was the part of the framework. As I mentioned, we have a lot of data that we are still analyzing, and we're also in the process of making the data set publicly available. As to my knowledge, this is the first data set in mobile and wearable data as longitudinal for detecting cyclic behavior. So we're hoping that the community can use this data and for further exploration and investigation. So with that, I just mainly talked about a few examples of my research in mental health prediction using the mobile and wearable signals. However, I would want to conclude with the challenges still remaining and the most important thing is that our models predictions are limited to what devices can sense. And we have seen in complex human behavior, these signals is challenging to provide like stable results or insights. For example, this is from one, we detected personality, adaptive, maladaptive personality detection, and it proved to be more challenging. And also, given the privacy concerns and lack of trust in technology issues with user engagement, the data becomes more and more challenging to collect from phones and wearable devices. So it introduces like interesting technical problems to deal with, how we can actually still build stable and robust prediction models with minimal amount of data we collect. And with that, I thank you.